Hey my beautiful souls, welcome back to Finding with Jessie, the life coach. If it's your first time here with me, my name is Jessie, I am a life coach, and today we are going to be diving into our series of narcissism, and today we are going to be focusing on diving into the background of narcissism and how do they become this way. So this is super important because a lot of people get trapped in how these people treat them. Like the victims, the people who get entangled with them, when it's all said and done, they can't wrap their heads around why did this person do what they do, especially if you're so good to them. It's like, what is, it's almost that feeling like, what is wrong with these people, right? Like, why do they do what they do? What is the purpose? Like, I was so good to them. I don't understand. And I hear a lot of that. And today we're going to be diving in. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions on why these people behave the way they behave. Now, before we get into it, I just want to send out a disclaimer that no matter what you have been through in life, it's never an excuse for treating anybody or treating people poorly or unfairly. Okay, so that's super important to really keep in mind, because a lot of people, a lot of their victims, a lot of people who get entangled with these types of individuals, they constantly make justifications for why people do what they do, why these people have treated them in a certain way. And I just want to make it very clear on this video, even though we're going to be diving into some of the background on why they behave this way, it's never an excuse for treating anyone poorly. A lot of people go through troublesome backgrounds, and I always say, if you ever follow me, that no matter who we are, we all come out of this life unscathed. Like, we all go through traumatic experiences that hurt our hearts, that wound us, that bruise us, situations that we feel like we're never gonna get over. People hurt us, they use us, they abuse us. We go through childhoods that are difficult, and a lot of us don't come out on the other side trying to take advantage and abuse others. No, what we do is we work on ourselves to become a better person. We don't cheat, lie, abuse, project. We take responsibility and accountability for our actions to make sure that we're not bleeding all over other individuals, and that's the way it should be. That's the proper way to do it. So just sending out that big disclaimer, okay? So we're going to get into it. So narcissism, one of the biggest reasons that it occurs is from traumatic childhood wounding, right? Now, I want to say that there's a lot of implications on this. So narcissism became known like in 1980. I think, 1980 is when it started becoming known on the DSM. Like, people started just realizing, like, this is a mental illness. This is like a big issue. And even though that was like over 40 years ago, there's still not a lot we know about it. And I said this in my last video. And one of the reasons for that is because these people think there's nothing wrong with them. Another big reason for why that is so is because narcissism usually affects the other person, not the person that actually has it. They usually benefit, especially if they get entangled with people who are enabling them and constantly making justifications and reasons for why they do what they do, and give them constant second chances, third chances, fourth chances, fifth chances, over and over and over and over. So if there's not a reason for them to change, they're not going to. So that's big information to keep in mind. And the reason why I'm giving you that information is because I want you to know that it's still developing. People, researchers and psychologists and people in the mental field still learning more about the situation and how it unfolds. And so it's a big implication that the way that narcissism develops is from traumatic childhood wounding, usually from a child who's been undernourished, like they've been neglected, or the opposite extreme of a child who's been overindulged. They've been overindulged with certain areas of their life. I'm going to give you an example. So let's say there's a kid who comes from money, right? They come from a prestigious background and they have a parent who overindulges them. They can have anything they want in the world, right? Because money buys happiness. Well, that's the way people feel, right? These people feel that money buys happiness. But indeed, all they're doing is giving them superficial things. And the child is not being emotionally nourished. like the emotional aspect that's needed to have a child that's balanced is not there. So a picture of that would be like a kid who can have any toy they want in the world. They probably have ponies. They probably have, everything they want, everything at their feet. But then at nighttime, the parent doesn't take time to read them a bedtime story. When they have a play or something of the sort that the parent needs to be front and center for at school, the parent is nowhere to be found. The nanny goes, it's just not important to them, or there's other things that is just occupying their time. So that's what I mean by overindulgent. The emotional side for a proper developed child to develop properly and become a stable and emotionally balanced adult, it's not there. And then we have the other extreme where kids are neglected. Kids can be neglected for any reason, so I just want to put that out there. Most people have grown up with emotionally unavailable parents that actually have been in survival mode, right? So you might have a parent that probably was, could be an alcoholic, could be a drug abuser, could be a parent who was physically abused, could be a parent that's a single parent that is just trying to keep food on the table, is trying to balance everything out, and because of that, they basically are neglectful to their child in their emotional development. Certain thing that a child needs to feel like their parents are present and they're getting the proper attention that they crave or they needed is absent, and narcissism can develop from that. Because of these issues, they usually suffer from abandonment issues. Now, it could be that they actually had a parent that abandoned them as well. So that's also a big factor. It might have been that they grew up with a grandparent, or their parent just wasn't there enough, or the parent is completely removed. So you'll find with a lot of men who grow up with a single mother, not all, but a lot of them wind up developing narcissistic either traits, or they are full-blown they'll have narcissistic personality disorder, because they suffer from abandonment issues from their father not being present. But like I said, it also could be the case like you weren't raised by your mother and you were raised by a grandparent or some other caregiver, right? So abandonment issues plays a big role with narcissism. So basically, when we speak about narcissism, they actually had an early childhood upbringing that was very indifferent, didn't show a lot of love, didn't show a lot of support, they were neglected, they were not seen, they felt unheard, they felt they couldn't express themselves, or maybe when they try to express themselves, it was shut down. Emotional needs were not met. They might have been like a very sensitive child and might have needed a little bit more, from one parent and didn't get it. Probably lack of concern, lack of interest. Is that kid always look at me, look at me, look at me, or mommy, look, I just hit the baseball, or daddy, look what I did, and the parent is very just off-putting, I don't got time for that, or I gotta run to do this, or I gotta run to do that. They're very distracted, right? So that's very, very prevalent in narcissism. What's also very prevalent and it's been a big part of the discussion of how it develops is attachment styles. So when we are younger, we are grouped into attachment styles of how our parent, usually a mother, has parented us. So the 4 attachment styles are secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. And they kind of sound just like they are. When you grow up in a secure attachment, that means that you had a parent that just catered to your emotional needs. So when you're a small child and you're crying, right? When you're a baby, you can't do much for yourself. So if you're crying and you want attention, or you want warmth, or you want love, or you need a bottle, or you need your pamper change, your parent is going to be very attentive to your needs. And when you grow up, you learn to feel safe in the world. You learn to feel like your needs are going to be met. You learn to feel that you could trust other people. So the next one is avoidant. So avoidant, like I said, they sound just like they are. If you grew up with an avoidant attachment style, that means your parent was not very attentive to your needs. They were very disengaged. They were not there. They were not present. And what happens is, in the subconscious of the child, they come to grow up to believe that the world is not safe. They grow up to believe that they can't trust other people. They usually grow up to be very paranoid. You'll find there's a lot of paranoia also linked to narcissism. Because of this, there's also this huge need for admiration. So you will find, if you've ever been entangled with a narcissist, they crave attention. It's always like, look at me, look at me, look at me. They're like those kids who never got the attention that crave it. They're very anxious. And because of that, when later on in life, they grow up to believe that they only could rely on themselves for their needs to be met. That's why they are so self-absorbed and so selfish. It's always an attitude of looking out for me. I gotta look out for me because nobody else is looking out for me, right? They're paranoid. They think everybody's out to get them or plotting on them or scheming on them. And to be honest, that's all in their mind. Usually they are the ones doing that. And because they are this way, they think everybody else is this way. But that's not true. I mean, obviously we could come across people like that. But for the most part, even when they find someone who's very trusting and very loving and very giving to them, instead of nurturing that and appreciating that, what they do is try to take advantage of that person. They try to, pull the wool over their eyes and try to play games with them and so on and so forth. So that's what an avoidant attachment style does to a person when they get older. And that's usually the attachment style that's linked to narcissism. It's usually avoidant. Now, the next attachment style is ambivalent. Now, ambivalent is going to be the parent that sometimes is attentive to the child's needs and sometimes is not. So it's like wishy-washy, up and down, they're in, they're out. Sometimes the child cries, they're running over there, with the bottle or, going to see what's wrong with the child. And other times, like the child is just completely ignored. Their emotional needs are not being met. And because of that, they grow up to believe in the subconscious again that they're like in and out. Like sometimes they can trust the world, sometimes they can't. They're very like unsure of their place in the world or who they are. Sometimes their needs are not going to be met, and that will play out in the way they do certain things in their adult life. So now the last attachment style is disorganized. This is when the parent might be passive, they might be like all over the place, they might be like erratic, they might go through like depression and things like that. And because of that, the attachment to the child suffers. And when the child gets older, they are not sure. They're just uneasy. They're just like very disorganized, whether they can rely on their needs to be met or not, right? So with these people, it comes out with like a lot of confusion. It might be like that person that's in and out, like very confused, not sure what to make out of people and things like that, right? So how we are raised plays a big part in narcissism, but not only narcissism, but also how we receive the world when we get older. Not only how we receive it, but also how we interact with the world. So a lot of times, I said this in a recent video, like a lot of times when we have communication issues and we have relationship issues, it's not really the relationship that is the issue. Like we blame and project other people, but truly it always starts within us. It might be our upbringing, and majority of the time, like 99% of the time, it is childhood wounding that we never processed or we never understood or has never been brought out to the conscious mind. Is deep rooted down in that subconscious where we don't even realize that all these things from our childhood or even from infantile stages, like these attachment styles start from like newborn. That's how like deeply ingrained it is, and we don't realize how that affects us, but it does affect us. And that's why I always talk about healing ourselves and going down to the root of the problem. Because if you don't go deep down there into the root, you're going to keep on repeating cycles and keep on repeating mistakes and go through roller coasters with individuals. And we think it's these individuals and all this stuff. But if you keep choosing the same person, it's not really the person that you're choosing anymore. Like that's not really the reason. That might be the reason why the relationships are all brought and things like that. But you have to start asking yourself, what is the pattern? It's always about patterns. You got to look at patterns. Now, when we talk about narcissism, it's actually really sad. And I know it's hard to really think like this when you might be the person that's being abused and going through the abusive cycle. But once you look at it from a higher perspective and you start seeing why these people do what they do, you actually start feeling empathy for them, right? Most of us are kind individuals who have a lot of sympathy and empathy for other individuals and what they go through. And if you're a person who has not hit that means you need to start elevating as an individual. You need to do a little bit more self-work on yourself to be able to get to that phase, right? And now a lot of people confuse this because they feel like if they hold empathy for these individuals, that means that you do not hold them accountable. And that's incorrect. You hold empathy for another person, you're not letting them off the hook. But this serves you. This serves you because it frees you. When you're able to hold empathy for another person and what they have gone through, it puts you in a different perspective of power to be able to see hurt people. And this has nothing to do with me. A lot of times when you're on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse, you internalize it and you start to believe that there's something about you that's wrong of why you are receiving this treatment. And the honest truth is it has nothing to do with you. And I've said this on another past video. It has nothing to do with narcissism. I think I was just talking about how to heal yourself. And I touched on this point of how you cannot internalize other people's pain. First of all, it's not our job. Excuse me. Second of all, it's not our burden. It's not our burden to bear. Whatever this person has gone through in their life and they're unhealed and they have a lot of wounding and they need to be able to process that, you can't take that on. So it's so important to be able to see things clearly with these individuals and how they're holding on to grand amount of trauma and pain from the past that has nothing to do with you. And the best thing you can do for yourself is hold empathy for them to release yourself, to free yourself, so you can understand that one is not your burden. Two is, when I say it's not your burden, means that it's not your problem. This is not your problem. You didn't create it. You cannot solve it. That's really important to understand with narcissism. Since this goes back to childhood wounding and their attachment styles, there's nothing that can possibly help them. Counseling will help them become more aware of their behavior, but nobody can go back in time for them and heal those wounds. Now, if they were dedicated enough, they possibly can make breakthroughs, but like I said, majority of the time, it's not their problem. If you feel a certain way, that's on you. That's how they behave. That's your problem. And they believe they're entitled to abuse you. That's something else that you have to keep in mind when we're talking about the higher scales of narcissism. When they are high up on the scales, not only do they abuse you, but they feel entitled to abuse you. So basically, if you are kind enough to keep on letting them in, they feel like, well, that's that person's problem. They should have just detached from me. But since they don't detach from me, I'm going to keep on abusing them. And I'm entitled to do it because they let me do it. I know these are mindsets that is hard to wrap your mind around, especially if you're really close. You like closely ingrained to the person. Like you can't think that they can be so abusive and not have any type of empathy or hold a space in their heart for what you're going through. But I'm telling you that is the fact, that is the case. So you need to be able to not only understand it, but prepare yourself for the truths that you're about to encounter and you're about to receive about narcissism. And one of the biggest ones is that hurt people hurt people. And the only thing that you can do is save yourself from pain. You can't save them. You can't rescue them. You kind of got to just let them figure it out on their own. And you have to figure out your path on your own. All right, guys, I hope that this video gave you a little insight into how deeply wounded a narcissistic person can be and how back the trauma goes and how you cannot fix this type of wound that they have in their heart and in their soul. And I will see you in my next one. Love and light. Mwah. Smooches and hugs. Bye.